There has never been a better time than now to monetize your personal brand by packaging and leveraging your intellectual property. However, this is also something that most professionals are struggling with, which keeps them stuck in their role, or if they run already their own business, it keeps them small. If that sounds a little bit too familiar, then you are in for a treat, because today we are joined by somebody who has not only made the jump herself from employee to entrepreneur, but actually now teaches others how you can get booked out in 90 days. Leanne Hughes is joining us today. Leanne, thanks so much for being here.
Petra, it's always an honor and a pleasure to talk to you. I just love your ideas. I love your way of thinking. I love your energy. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, I'm super excited because I have known you for quite some time, and I'm one of those lucky ones who have known you literally since day dot. You interviewed me for your podcast on the day you resigned, and that's been 3 years, and I've seen you going from strength to strength to strength. You are an international speaker, you're a facilitator, you are a coach and a podcast host. And the one thing that stands out for me is that you constantly raise the bar in terms of coming up with new ideas, new ways to do business development, new ways to create experiences that go beyond the traditional way of how we do things. Where do you get your ideas and inspiration from?
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for highlighting that, because that's probably one of the things that I put my hat on and say, like, I'm very proud to just have an engine of never ending ideas. And the thing was, in corporate, though, this wasn't really celebrated at all. I think I was a bit of a nuisance because I kept questioning, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? Like, why can't we do it differently? And in some organizations that's embraced, for my most recent experience, it wasn't. So where do I get the ideas from? I think it's quite innate. One of my top strength in the Gallup Strengths Finder is ideation. I literally think of ideas constantly. And so as a result, I'm not scared to share them with the world, because once the world has them, I'm ready to move on to the next one. So even as a little kid, I think when I was 5 years old, I went to a birthday party, and I remember my parents dropping me off, and it was the most boring birthday party I've ever been to. There were no games, activities, we're just sitting around the backyard. And I remember my parents picking me up and sharing with them that I was so frustrated with that experience, because my dad, he's an engineer, and I would craft these birthday parties that had set agendas. We got X Factor prizes. We would go through all of the books and like pick our favorite games and just create a flow. So I think that willing to challenge sort of anything, but also I'm driven by time is so short, so let's make the most of the opportunities that we have. And I think that drives the idea creation process as well. It's just, finding it and not being afraid to put it out to the world.
I love it. And it also goes to show that you've got a high level of self-awareness. You know your strength. Was it always the case, or did you find it out?
No, it wasn't always the case, because like I said before, when I was working in corporate and I wasn't making traction and people weren't responding to my ideas, I actually thought something was wrong with me. And then I did this strengths report, and it pulled out these things. So ideation, maximizer, turning things from good to great, activator, just getting stuck in and going for it. Futuristic is up there as well. And it put it in language that I was like, oh, okay, I'm actually okay. This is a strength. But if I'm not having the opportunity to use it internally, how can I start leveraging these for whatever I want to do with my life? And I don't want to live. I mean, one of the things about strengths they say is at work, if I get to do what I do best every single day, I'm highly engaged with my role. And what I could see from this very clearly from the data was that these top 5 strengths were not being played out at work. So I had to think about, what do I do next? And the answer to that was, well, maybe I become my own boss because I don't need to get authority to make decisions. I can just go with what I want to do.
This is such an important point that you made, that you didn't know it straight away and something kind of felt off. And I had the exact same experience. I progressed quickly and then everything felt hard. It was simply because I didn't was put in a position that I could apply my strength. And what got me there has now become my biggest baggage, because I also question things. And it's like, oh my God, is it meant to feel hard like that? And I also didn't perform at that level anymore. And as high performer, we're driven by doing the best that we can. And all of a sudden we are simply not designed to do it anymore.
Yeah. But I also remember walking into work and saying good morning to everyone. And everyone was like, good, just not happy and slumped over their desk as well. And so with that, the qualitative data of going in every day and recognizing this wasn't an environment where, look, there were some absolute positives to it, but 80% of the time, which is a significant amount of time, my strengths weren't being utilized. So I could either accept that, but I'm not willing to do that because of everything I said before. We have a short time on earth. I want to make the most of it. And that's what really brought me into this whole creating a personal brand.
Yes, and you started already whilst you were still in corporate. But did you know before you resigned or thought about resigning what you're going to do next? Did you have a plan?
Did I have a plan? I had some vague ideas. I mean, what I wanted to do was basically what I was doing internally. I was working for a global organization running learning and development programs, leadership training. And I was getting really great gigs as a result of that, flying all around the world, getting great feedback, and then obviously getting booked out with other mind sites. The executive team got me to run their strategy session. So I thought, oh, this is cool. And once I went to Mongolia for work, I thought, there's no other country I want to go to now. So I thought, why don't I just offer this externally? And if it fails after a year, I'm not unemployable. I'm sure I could find a job. So that was all really that was going through my mind. But Petra, it was a year of building up the brand. Jenny Blake calls it creating a pivot runway. So saving some cash resources, but also on the side after work is creating that content, creating the narrative about where I wanted to position myself. And then, so the time that I left, I wasn't dropped. I felt like I was flying off the tarmac. Yeah.
And this makes you such a great role model because you built a roof before it rained. So you did build a runway, and you also said you did something outside your 9 to 5, and you did something that others often aren't willing to do, to give up their weekends, to give up their nights, binge watching Netflix and so forth. But this is exactly what you need to do to make a transition. Were you quite intentional what you need to do to build your brand, or how did you choose the activities?
Well, that was probably the interesting part about it. So brand building probably wasn't the primary objective of the podcast that I started, which is for facilitators. The reason I started my podcast was from scratching my own itch. I was going to Canada to deliver leadership training. I was looking for podcasts that could help me manage group dynamics, manage if anything went wrong, and I couldn't find it. There were all podcasts on public speaking presentation skills. So when I flew back, I thought, why not start this scratch the own itch? And so first of all, I get to chat to cool facilitators, find out what they do. Then I get to learn and get better in my role. So that was the primary objective. Then secondary to that was all the brand building. So like I said, these opportunities to fly to multiple locations really shifted my role from being back of house to sort of front of stage. That was a side effect of the podcast because people within my organization were seeing me post about this on LinkedIn. And they're like, oh my gosh, no one else in the business is doing this. Like Leanne's just creating this whole media outlet. Like, how is she doing it? And then then I was like hanging out with executives doing tours of A380s with Qantas because the executive were there. That would never have happened without the podcast. So it was a selfish need, number one, but the benefit of brand building was like absolutely like the coolest thing that came out of it.
Amazing. And I want to unpack two things because you said there was nothing out there, but I didn't also quite know exactly what it is. So I just created something. And often people are struggling to find their quote unquote niche or specialization because everything has been done. No, it hasn't. And it hasn't been done in the way that you would approach it. And then at the same time, what we call outside in approach. Often when people are getting stuck in their career progression, it's because they don't have the visibility. And internally, it's not maybe facilitated to get visible, but you're still very much in control what you can do outside your work. Yes. Podcast, you can do it very cheaply and very easily. But again, not everyone takes this next step.
Yeah, there's a lot of hesitation in taking this step because, again, I look around to my left and to the right of me and no one else is doing it. So I actually heard a really great quote today, Petra, on the Daily Stoic. I probably have to fact check it, but the guy said, in the Bible, the most common used phrase or something that is relevantly referred to is don't be afraid. Like that is like the most common sort of phrase or theme in the Bible. And it's the same thing. Like it still plays out now, right? So there's always that fear of like, should I start a podcast? What if it doesn't go well? I think for me, the thing that reduce the risk was even if no one listens to this, I'm still getting massive value. It's still a great investment of my time because I'm connecting with people and I'm learning. So if you want to take the switch off, if the fear of like no one listening and echo chamber, then maybe just be selfish and go like, what would I love to learn? And what you'll notice is that there's people around the world that also connect with that. If you're scratching your own itch, you might find that other people around the world wanted to scratch that itch as well.
So true. And I'm a big fan, as you know, of building a portfolio career because you build skill sets much quicker, you build networks much quicker, and you build experience much quicker. And if you need to transition or want to transition, you can do it easier rather than starting from scratch and then working your way back up. Now, you also said, I give myself 1 year in worst case, I go back. You never went back in 3 years. What has been happening since then? And how did you land your first client, especially coming out of corporate?
Yeah, well, that's it's so funny. The 1 year thing, yeah. Like I really didn't want to have to find another job, but I was like, oh, look, security blanket, it's good to have that. Where I think it's overrated is our internal network, the network we already have. And what I see a lot of people that are experts that go out and have to find clients, they always talk about finding new leads, and they associate finding new leads with finding new people. But I think, and as I've shared with you, Petra, on a few occasions, I find it's always that network that we have, that we've built over time through delivering great work, for being of value, that can help us. And a couple of gigs that came out when I left was an old friend from university. He had seen me posting about my podcast about facilitation. He'd been listening to it. He had a retreat down the Gold Coast and he asked me to run it for 2 days. So that was the first gig. The other gig came out in my last week of work. There was a session in Sydney. I live in Brisbane, and they were just doing a train the trainer of our leadership program. Now, I had the option of not going because it was my last week. But like, look, Leanne, you don't have to do this. But I'm like, I'm going to Sydney. I'm saying farewell. I'm going to share things. And as I was there that evening, I had a drink with one of the contacts at the organization. She goes, Leanne, what do you want to do in future? Like, what's your plan? The same question you asked me, Petra. I was like, look, I don't really know. I know one day I'd love to live in Asia. I think that'd be really fun. And she just said, oh, well, Leanne, would you like to deliver our leadership programs in Asia? I was like, yes, yes, I would. And so that was an internal contact. And that's not a fairy tale for everyone, but I'm sharing it just as an example of, I think we undervalue the people we've already connected with, and we sort of take them for granted, whereas they're the ones that I think focus your most energy on, particularly if you're thinking of starting something fresh. But yeah, that one conversation led to gigs around Hong Kong, Singapore, India, even work this year, all virtually, providing the same type of programs. So one conversation, one contact, like.
Exactly. And it goes to show being visible in front of the right people, and even just articulating what you want. This is all it takes, because nobody can read our mind. And just by you saying, you know what, Asia would be amazing. You didn't say working in Asia, you just said Asia. And that connected her with what was on her mind.
Yes.
And that opens new opportunities, which is incredible.
Absolutely. Like the intentionality piece is really strong. And while I'm not saying have like a 5-year plan, but it is good to have an idea of where you want to take your business and not to be stuck in the weeds of right now, knowing that things can change, but also just having that idea so you can, during those conversations or with the way that you show up and direct your content and energy, you can, like we talked about the plane, you can get on that flight path.
Yes. And what we also see now, working from home a lot more, that we live in those micro moments. We don't have a lot of time to get our point across. We don't have the stand-up huddles necessarily. We don't have the water cooler conversations. So it comes down to being able in 30 to 60 seconds to get your point across, give people an update, but also share what you want to do next. Have you got a tip how we can be precise without being too douchey about it, but also, how can we say what we want without being too in people's face?
Yeah, it's so interesting. And Jim Rohn, who I love, I was listening to one of his audiobooks the other day, and I think I shared this with your community. Was it late last year? But talking about brevity and the importance of keeping it brief, and again related to time is finite. Let's make the most of the opportunity we have right now. So I think it comes back to the intentionality of what you want to drive and thinking about that up front. Once you have that North Star of like what is the point that you want to come across, you can actually start filtering out and cutting off the fat around it. Not saying that storytelling is effective, but again, like how do you create that moment where you can summarize like the key points rather than giving it a play for play. I think it depends on the context of what you're going into, but again, go back to the intentionality. What do you actually want? I see so many emails, right? I'm scrolling and scrolling going, what does this person actually want? Like I've got the context, I've got these points. It's like, what do you want from me? Okay, just state that up front, and then maybe give some data points, tell a story to supplement it if required.
Yes, having other people's time in mind, and also what they actually want to get out of the conversation, because it makes it a lot easier to say yes or no in whatever way. Now, if people are thinking of doing their own thing in one or the other way and monetizing their personal brand, how would you say, can we get started?
Yeah, I think there's very different ways of doing it, and you've got to pick the business model that aligns with you. And I've tried a few different things. Like when I started the podcast, I had no I didn't want to monetize it at all. But I think it was Seth Godin who says you can monetize in different ways. One is through direct revenue, through cash. So someone will pay for your coaching or for your expertise. But the second way to monetize is through trust and attention, through that brand awareness. So in that first year, first time facilitator, all I was doing was buying that sort of currency of trust and attention. And I think that's exactly what you're talking about when you talk about personal authority. Then underneath that, once you have the trust, once you have the attention, you can monetize that in so many different ways. In the context of what I do, that comes in the form of workshops, facilitation, through keynote speaking, through coaching, even through, you talked about ideas at the beginning. People will actually book my time so they can pick my brain, right? So we have like an ideation session. That's like my most favorite thing. It can come through, I mean, there's so many different business models and approaches that you can take. Again, think about what your favorite form of delivering these messages is. It writing, even just starting on Medium and getting your ideas out? Listen to Petra and how she forms her models. I got paid, I wrote an article earlier this year and it was like, I got paid $10 in the first week. I know that's not much, but it signals something more. It signals, wow, this is actually getting eyeballs. Maybe there's something in this. So yeah, I think of your preferred medium. Think about those two different revenue streams and how you can maximize both. The second one will give you more options in future though.
I love this progression, because you need to start somewhere. Otherwise, we don't know, we don't get any data points. And Mark Schaefer, I interviewed just recently, he also talks about the cumulative advantage. We're always looking for, oh, when is Oprah calling us? Or when we get the big investment, it doesn't happen, by the way. But what does happen is people are sharing your content. They are sending you a DM saying, you know what, resonated with me, I took action. Somebody gave you a call to get, a promotion, whatever it might be. It's those tiny steps along the way that gives you the validation that there is something, and then you want to refine it.
Yeah, can I add something there as well, just that I thought of, is the whole piece about the connection economy. A lot of the time we think we've got to add value by putting out valuable content or just being a valuable service to someone else. Someone I see this that does it really well, Jordan Harbinger, is his currency is connecting people, because once you help people form their own connections and they get a great experience from that, they'll always attribute it back to you. So there is real value. If you're working internally right now, I would absolutely just get in connecting with the people that you know, see what networks you can form, what introductions can be made. Just do that as an experiment internally, because that's a skill set you will absolutely need when you leave.
Oh, this is such a tangible and very insightful advice, because I talk a lot about the trusted authority, because hierarchies are getting leaner and more agile. So you can't necessarily progress and get the title because there are not that many senior roles, but you can very much influence because you're the trusted authority. And this is what you can eventually monetize. And you mentioned it just before, you've built the trust through podcast. So what you did was you let people get to know you by you sharing your ideas, content, your personality. And people could make up their own mind. Is Leanne for me or not so much? And when you say not so much, it's a good thing, because it means you're attracting the right people and also detracting the wrong ones.
Absolutely. Yeah. And something about voice as well. You get it's very easy to create a trusted relationship through, people call it a very intimate medium. I listen to lots of different podcasts, but I feel like if I was to meet the host over a coffee, and I've met a few, like we can instantly just develop rapport, because like I know everything about them. I know their kind of humor. It is a bit stalkery, but yeah, audio is fun.
Yes, and this is what makes you likable, because if we can speak people's language, they feel understood. So we like this person, and we're talking a lot about going from the technical expert to the translator. It's simply you knowing how to talk their language, and not just throwing all the jargon at somebody and the other person just stares at us with these big eyes. What does it even mean?
Love that. Technical to translator. Yeah, that's awesome.
Now, you obviously knew you had a skill set. Did you know straight away how you want to monetize it outside of facilitation? Have you thought about that further?
That's what I'm currently working on. So actually I'm working on my own transition from facilitator to authority as well, right? So because facilitation is all about, you're an expert, but you're an expert in group process. You're an expert in getting teams to make a decision. You're an expert in for me, content was leadership, right? Team dynamics was my expertise. But now I want to transition from being that person that can do it to then like being the go-to. And what it comes down to, I think a lot of the time, is what we're trying to do is create change with these groups, like moving them from one thing to another. So in terms of the way that I've monetized, it has been for the first couple of years purely on the back of the delivery work, the workshops, the speeches, the coaching, as I mentioned before. But where I want to move to in future is actually getting people to ring me for advice and monetizing it that way, because that would be the ultimate, right? So sharing the ideas, because I have positioned myself as the expert in this particular area. So Petra, I'm going to binge all of your episodes to help me on that journey.
But I'm also part of your group, Booked Out, how to become a booked out facilitator in 90 days, because we all have our strength, our processes, our systems, but sometimes it just needs to get the validation, but also to get the kick in the backside, because everything that you do for the first time is daunting, and we just put on the back burner and we never do it and we never get the traction. So I'm super excited to learn also from you what I can do better, and we can all do better.
We can all do better. Yeah. And the 3 things I talk about in that program that are key are your craft. So you actually, like, how good are you at doing the thing that you do? Your connections, who are you connecting with? Again, let's not undervalue our existing connections, but how can we, I talk about blipping on the radar. So just everything is about consistency. And I know, Petra, you are the most consistent person I know. But how do you sort of stay front of mind in front of the people that matter? And then the final one is content, and using that narrative of what you're creating for the world to drive where you want to go. And I think all of us have our strengths, like, and many people that I talk to, their strength is craft. Like we've decided to do this because we're good at the thing. The other 2 is where we need to really need to focus our energy and our efforts.
And that already makes you an authority, because one of the ways how to become the authority is to create a framework for others to follow. And you identified correctly that it's not just being the best, but it's also others knowing that you are the best in doing it. And how do you do it? By connecting with others and by creating content. And this is your sweet spot, which I love. And why people are getting stuck is because they're usually over-indexing in the one area that they're really familiar with. So we've been facilitating, we've been doing our role, we've never done the outreach, the content creation, the speaking. So we're just putting it on a back burner and then wonder, I don't know why I'm still here.
That's it. They're like, it's so frustrated. Like, why am I not getting any? Why am I not waking up to these emails or these inquiries? Why am I not getting phone calls? And it's because of those 2 other areas. Yeah.
But the one thing that I'm really curious about, because you are making a lot of changes and transitions yourself, and your personality type is to put something out there before it's perfect. But are you thinking about it sometimes that, from an imposter syndrome, can I talk about that already? But there are others who are better at it. Or you're like, nah.
Well, I don't understand. Like, I read other people's articles. It's like, that's okay. Like, it just seems, let's see, a lot of regurgitated material. So I'm not really feeling the imposter syndrome. The thing that gets it for me is going back to my comfort zone. So, because I've talked about things for so long, I just feel like it's easy just to continue that. Stopping and creating a new narrative requires, for me, a lot more conscious effort and focus, but also disrupting myself. And so it's rather than the imposter syndrome, it's probably more a case of, Leanne, just step out of the habit of what you've been doing and just do something else. But I keep falling for, what's that James Clear quote? You rise to the level of your goals, you drop to the level of your habits, or something like that. So I find that I'm just dropping to the level of my habits and just being, okay, let's do this, rather than drawing a line in the road and going, right, from this date forward, I'm the authority on this, and charging all in. And I think we actually, because of the saturation in the world, we do have to be that definitive in what that authority is. And what that also means is saying goodbye to what success you've had. And I love that Marshall Goldsmith book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. It's so true. We spoke about grief just before this, not in a morbid way, but you've got to say goodbye to some things, and you've got to say goodbye to your comfort levels and some, like, maybe some connections and things to forge this new path. And I think the saying goodbye part is probably the resistance for me.
Absolutely. And this is also what we're seeing in the future of work and the trends, that we don't just change jobs more frequently thanks to technology and automation and the roles simply not being relevant anymore, but also going through more transitions in careers, which means that you constantly have to change your narrative and actually make sense of your background for your next decision maker. So you have to pitch yourself more frequently and in a way that resonates with them, which comes down to being the translator. If you can't make sense out of yourself and your own background, we can't expect anyone else to make sense out of us.
No. What's that Don Miller quote? If you confuse, you'll lose. And it's like, like, I remember someone asking me straight up, like, what do you do? And I was like, I'm like, there was no brevity on it. And it's like, there's a problem there. There's a problem there. Yeah.
which comes down to practicing. Nobody just wakes up and has the perfect pitch ready to go. And it's also getting some feedback. Does it resonate with what I'm saying, or is it completely off the charts and you have no idea what I'm doing?
Yeah. Yeah. And you're right. Yeah.
It also makes us less referable. If I don't know what you're doing, I actually can't refer you because, ooh, not sure what you're doing.
Yeah, you don't even know yourself. Yeah, exactly.
No. And this is also what we're seeing, that jobs are actually getting filled through networks and through the people that you know. Also, what you're talking about, it's often maybe the person that you're talking to, not the decision maker, but this person knows of somebody. Now, you're also talking about, to wrap the conversation up, how can we take a conversation further to not just say, hey, it was good to catch up and we don't hear from this person anymore. Yes. How can we transition it into commercial opportunity?
Yeah, that's something I talk about in my module, how to turn a virtual coffee into something more meaningful, because I think my trap was I'd catch up for coffees and be great, but there wasn't any sense of work, right? It was just a social coffee. And it's something I've learned a lot from Alan Weiss. He's got a great book, The Martial Arts of Language. It's about spinning conversations. Because I think a lot of time when we have a conversation, if we get asked a question, we'll answer the question. What we won't do is question the question. And I think this makes you an effective facilitator as well, because people will call you. And again, first year, people will say, hey, could you run a 2-day leadership course? And my answer would be yes. But I didn't question the question. Why do you need it? Right? Yeah. Once you start digging, then you start creating a bigger frame for what's about to happen. And even in the context of what I love about his, he talks about your value proposition and keeping it quite broad. So you might say something like, oh, I'm here to help you build your team performance, or like get your projects delivered in under 50% of the time they're taken now. So the first response from someone is going to be, how do you do that? Right? Like, what do you mean by that? How do you do that? And then you respond by saying, well, give me a situation. Is there a project team within your business that needs to get work done faster? So then you move from talking about a hypothetical thing to something they can relate to in their context and environment. And once you can start talking about that, that opens up doors. So that's it. It's just maneuvering conversations. And it's hard sometimes because your mind can be elsewhere, like not present. But yeah, that's a really great way to shift those conversations. And it happens in those one-to-ones.
I love this tip. And also what I love about your approach, that you're mixing and matching different insights and ideas and learnings from different industries, which is exactly what innovation is all about. It doesn't need to be something that the world hasn't seen before. It's about creating a new spin on something that hasn't been discussed in that way.
Yes. Yeah, I love that.
Amazing. Now, Leanne, I'm super excited to be part of your booked out cohort number 2. But what is next for you? What is 2022 look for you, ideally?
Well, I think it's going to be a new media platform. So I think I'm going to say goodbye to the First Time Facilitated podcast after 200 episodes, which is pretty exciting. And I'm still in the works in that liminal state of deciding what that new exciting project is. But I'm building, like, I've got a YouTube studio downstairs. Not really. I've just painted some walls. So that's all I've got so far, but that's exciting. Booked Out Facilitator will continue as a self-run program. That's over at bookedoutfacilitator.com. And if you want to connect with me, LinkedIn, of course, is great. I'm connected to Petra, and my website, which will have my new services and offerings, is at leannehughes.com.
Amazing. And honestly, I can't wait to see what's next for you, because you always inspire me. You're always setting new standards and you never get boring, and you're always leading the way by simply doing it, also when it's not perfect, but you figure it out as you go. Yeah,
definitely. It's a fun way to live. And you do the same, Petra. I think it's good that we're friends. We keep inspiring each other.
Yes. Thank you so much, Leanne. It's been amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.